And welcome to the Grill Report with journalists Charles W. Kim and Nicole M. Wells. How's it going, Nicole?
Pretty good, Charles. How about yourself?
Oh, pretty good. This week there's been a lot of controversy and reaction to a tweet Roseanne Barr made earlier in the week that ended up with her reboot of her show on ABC getting canceled. And the bottom line to the tweet that she put out had to do with former White House advisor and Obama advisor, senior advisor, Valerie Jarrett. And Roseanne's tweet was Muslim Brotherhood and Planet of the Apes equals VJ. Within the same day of that tweet, and by the way, Roseanne did put out an apology for the tweet. But that same day, ABC Television canceled Roseanne's reboot, which this year is probably arguably the most, the first season of the show was the highest rated television network show, the half-hour sitcom. And it's gone now. What do you think about that?
I mean, this is a loaded question. I think that you can sit there and wring your hands all you want about whether the tweet, was racist, whether it was, racially insensitive, whether it was offensive. Because it's going to be all of those things to, all manner of people. Depending on how you're coming at it, your life experiences are going to shape how you view what she said. But I don't think that people should be crucified, and their livelihoods taken away for one offensive tweet, especially in light of the fact that she did apologize for it, shortly after. And it's not like there haven't been, every day since the 2016 election, there's been some type of offensive statement made, by someone, whether it's on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Snapchat, whatever platform you wanna pick. There's been some sort of insensitive or racist or offensive, comparison being made. Whether it's, referencing Donald Trump or, anyone from a previous administration or anybody really. So I think that she shouldn't have been crucified, especially in light of the fact that she apologized.
Well, it's not just her either. But the tweet, the reaction from the tweet, Wanda Sykes, who is an African-American female comedian, and was one of the writers on the show. I believe she even appeared in a couple episodes. She immediately quit. She immediately quit the show. And within hours, ABC decided to cancel the whole show because of all the flack that the tweet had generated. Now, funny thing, curious little thing. This is right after the election in 2016, and I just want to play this for you. This is Wanda Sykes.
I couldn't believe that Donald Trump won. I couldn't believe that we have elected an orangutan to run the country. I couldn't believe it. I was like,
so Roseanne lost her job, and Wanda Sykes quit for making the same joke about Valerie Jarrett that Wanda Sykes made about President Trump. And I know what everybody's going to say. Well, Valerie Jarrett was the president. But she was a senior advisor in the White House. That makes her a public official. And as far as any criticisms or whatever, she is just as open game as the president or vice president. And then now we can all say, you should or you shouldn't criticize these people or what level you should go. But the point of the matter is, there's a little bit of hypocrisy going on here. A little bit of hypocrisy. Why should... And everybody knows that the Roseanne show tended to favor the election of Trump. Did that have something to do with it?
I mean, if you get on Twitter, and you follow the conversation for a while, yeah, there's a lot of people out there who believe that ABC was just looking for a reason to cancel Roseanne. That her show was too openly supportive of Trump's election, that the show was just too conservative, and it had to go because it did not fit the narrative that the mainstream media wants to put out there, to promote. You're either with us or against us, it seems to be these days. And, if you're against us, well, you got to go because there's just no room for diversity of thought, despite the fact that we are told diversity is our savior, is the answer to all of our prayers. Apparently it's only diversity in skin tone and not diversity in thought. Because if you have any diversity of thought, the thought police will immediately be dispatched. As we discussed on our previous show about Tommy Robinson, if you have any diversity of thought, if you commit, a thought crime, they will immediately come and lock you up or take away your show. So as Roseanne's learning the hard way, either you're with us or against us at this point in America. It's kind of sad.
And I want to go back, what we're talking about being compared to monkeys and things, and certainly you take a look at the tweet that Roseanne made, and it could be interpreted as being racist. But here on the other point too, let's go back 6 years. Let's go back to 2012. Let's go back to 6 years before Donald Trump's election. And here is a comment from Bill Maher, one of his new rule segment on his HBO show. So let's take a listen to that.
New rule: Donald Trump must immediately submit to DNA test to determine whether he is in fact the love child of a human woman and an orangutan from the Brooklyn Zoo.
Now there again, Bill Maher is making almost the exact same comparison, as saying that Trump is the byproduct of of what he said, orangutan at the zoo. Now this is the same exact thing that Roseanne did and was held accountable for, the same exact thing. So, it just seems that there is a bit of hypocrisy going on in the media. I think you hit the nail on the head, Nicole, that you're either with us or against us.
Yeah, I mean, it's sad that this is the state of, the national media, if you want to call them that. But basically the National Association of Cheerleaders at this point, for, liberal thought. If you are a conservative in news, in journalism, in entertainment, you are shut down, you are shouted down, you are told, your opinion is misogynistic, is racist, is bigoted, is insert ism here, whichever one you'd like. But you're basically told, you're wrong. Just step aside, shut your mouth, move on, because you're wrong.
And if we say those things, like Bill Maher, he still has his show on HBO. That show hasn't gone anywhere. No one's canceled it.
Well, that's the point, is that there are two sets of rules in America. There are rules for liberals and there are rules for conservatives. And the two are not the same. It would seem, based on, the evidence. I mean, this is not, we're sitting here playing, pretend with our feelings. This is the evidence that, what a liberal does and what a conservative does, even though they are the same thing, may not result in the same outcome. And very often do not result in the same outcome.
Well, the liberals, the left, is maybe getting a little bit of taste of this, because this was just happening today, on May 31st. Samantha Bee, who is certainly to the left and also has a show, I believe it's on HBO, Full Frontal.
Because that's not a provocative title.
Yeah. She made a tweet out today that criticized the first daughter, Ivanka Trump, and I cannot even repeat the entirety of the tweet. Needless to say, she called Ivanka Trump a feckless C-word. So, doing Auto Trader, one of the show's sponsors, is pulling their ads out. So this is kind of, at least now we're seeing a little bit of parody. You know, one of the stars of a show makes a tweet, and at least in this case, there's a little bit of the same consequence for doing that.
Yeah, there's a little bit of the same consequence for doing that. But I mean, if you look at it in a more nuanced light, you know, the cases are slightly different. You know, what Roseanne did was done on her own time. You know, it wasn't done in the context of her show. It had nothing to do with her work. It was done on her own personal time. What Samantha Bee did, you know...
well, that was also on her own time.
Oh, okay. Well, it was my understanding it was done during her show. But, yeah, I mean, at least we're getting tit for tat here. Because before, you know, you had people calling for boycotts of, you know, conservatives like Laura Ingraham.
Oh, no, actually, you're correct, Nicole. She said that during her show.
Yeah, that's what I thought. So, you know, back to what I was saying, you know, you have two very different things here. Roseanne was tweeting on her own time. She wasn't, you know, using her show to promote her view about something. You know, Samantha Bee was doing something on her show, you know, in her place of work. You know, those are two very different things. At least to my mind. You know, I mean, using your employer as a platform for your own personal views is very different than, you know, what you do on your downtime away from your job.
Well, but people have also, for years, and again, this is not new, you know, for anybody who thinks that this is a new thing, you know, with what's happening with the NFL, well, the league recently announced that it is going to enact sanctions against players that go onto the sidelines of an NFL game and kneel or protest during the national anthem.
Well, that's because they were losing too much money. I mean, bottom line, you had a lot of people who boycotted the season, you know, last year and said, enough is enough. We're not going to put up with these players that are unpatriotic and won't stand for the national anthem, so we're just not going to watch it. So the NFL probably got tired of losing some money.
Well, I also think there's a difference there. And to me, and this is in one of the discussions I had on social media in talking about this, when you're a player in the NFL and you're suited up for a game and you go out there, you're on the clock, you're working, and the point in the game early on when they do the national anthem, to me, I look at that as the way I was brought up anyway, is that's akin to a prayer in church. Now, you could be an atheist attending a wedding, let's say, or a funeral, or someone's bar mitzvah, or, you know, whatever the church event is, or maybe you just wandered into the church out of curiosity. But good manners and proper decorum dictate, I would almost say mandate, that if people stand up during the service to say a prayer, whether or not you believe in that religion, that you would also, out of decorum and human decency, stand up to be respectful of that belief system. And I feel that the same way about the national anthem.
Well, I think that you're absolutely right. But I think that the difference today versus when you were brought up was that you didn't have, this nation of snowflakes that was brought up to think that, the world revolves around them, and, if it doesn't agree with their personal worldview, their interests, their feelings, how they see things is paramount. And it doesn't matter what proper protocol is. If they don't agree with it, if they don't think it's right, if it's not what their thing is, they're not going to stand for it. They're not going to participate. They're not going to follow the proper protocol. But that's what happens when you hand out gold stars and, participation trophies. Everyone's a winner, and, heaven forbid anyone else should tell you how to do you. That's the generation of snowflakes that's been raised in America. They're also called millennials, but, I like to call them snowflakes because if you look at them, predominantly they're snowflakes.
Well, the thing is, and there are two issues at play here, and we're going to get into the second one in a minute. I mean, personally, if you ask me, first of all, regardless of my political views, I'm not a big fan of Roseanne Barr. And ironically, it was a performance about 10 or 15 years ago when she sang the national anthem during a baseball game. And she was making it funny, and she sang it horribly. And did some other things too. Baseball players, normally you put your hand on your crotch and stuff like that. And she did that at the end. And just for me, I didn't like the humor, and to me it was disrespectful. And because of that, I was not, from that point on, a Roseanne Barr fan. So frankly, do I personally care what happened to her? No. But the bigger issue that I see is that we have to treat everybody equally. If we're going to take away Roseanne's show, then Samantha Bee deserves to lose her show. Bill Maher needs to lose his show. And why? ABC? The network Roseanne was on? That's also the network The View is on.
Let's not even get started there. My goodness.
Joy Behar? And Whoopi Goldberg? The names that they have called even their own castmate, Meghan McCain? The animals that they have compared people they don't like to? Why is The View still on the air? If this is bad, and this is a required punishment, why doesn't it apply to everyone equally?
I already gave you the answer to that. I mean, it's very simple. There are two sets of rules in America. There are ones that apply to liberals, i.e. Hillary Clinton, where, everything rolls right off like Teflon. No matter how many things people bring up, it just never quite seems to stick. And there are rules that apply to conservatives, like Roseanne. To sit there and say that there isn't a double standard, that there aren't two sets of rules, would be ludicrous, because the proof is all around you.
It's obvious.
I mean, it's not even like we're sitting here trying to hide behind things anymore. It's very blatant. It's very obvious.
Very in your face.
It's not like, something that we have to hush and, hide behind smoke and mirrors. Just like everything else today in terms of politics, culture, everything is right out there in the open. It's not, we have to actually, have some sort of standard of behavior and decorum. That's all gone. It's very harsh in your face, contact sport kind of culture we live in now. And this is the result. But, it's fine if this is the result, if everyone is judged by the same standard. But the problem is that the standard is always shifting, and it's never shifting in conservatives' favor. And that, I think, is what everyone is so hung up about, when they're lambasting ABC online on social media, and they're all coming to Roseanne's defense. And granted, not everyone is coming to Roseanne's defense. I'm simply talking about the conservative side of it. There's obviously tons and tons of people on the liberal side that are very happy that Roseanne has lost her show and think that that is exactly what should have happened to her.
Just like we would be if they canceled The View and got those...
Yes, absolutely.
Got those pseudo-women.
Those angry women.
Well, pseudo-women, I don't think they're really human, but...
Well, it depends.
I can say that, guys.
Well, for now, I mean... For now, the First Amendment's still in play.
And you're a public figure, Joy, and Whoopi. Yeah, I can say that. You guys are horrible.
Well, not like they're actually listening, but...
You're horrible human beings.
Are you done? Can you step off the soapbox? All right.
I was just getting started.
Well, you have plenty of time. But, on the conservative side, that's what everybody is so riled up about on social media, is that, conservatives are not judged by the same standards as liberals. And after a while, you get tired of it. You get tired of being called every name in the book for merely adhering to and believing in what used to be considered standard traditional values in America. Once upon a time, which wasn't that long ago, because I'm not that old, once upon a time, these were the typical mores and standards of, the average American family. What's even sadder is that, Roseanne, the show Roseanne, tended to bring together both sides of the aisle in a way that you really don't see anymore. And I think that's why the show was doing so well and was so successful in its reboot, in that, it kind of served as the kitchen table almost.
The kitchen table of America.
Yeah, the kitchen table of America, where you would sit down and you would hash out your differences with, people in your family that you tended not to agree with the way people used to at Thanksgiving or Christmas. These days, people just tend to boycott. But you used to talk and have conversations and discuss, why it is you disagreed. I think that's why it was so successful, because people are yearning for that kitchen table. People work all crazy schedules anymore, because the standard 9 to 5 is not so standard anymore. So everybody's working crazy schedules. Everybody's working different hours. Families do not eat together in the way that they used to. So you don't have that time, to have these conversations, to hash out these differences. And I think that's why it was so successful, because people connected to that feeling of sitting at the kitchen table and talking to people they didn't agree with in their own families.
Now, excuse me. Now, we do have, like I said, two different situations going on here. Maybe even three. Definitely two. You have Samantha Bee and the NFL players who are on the clock. Now, if you express yourself at work on the clock, should companies be able to sanction you for disagreeing with the overall, let's say, employment culture of where you're working?
I think that they should be able to. They have every right to. Your First Amendment protections apply as a citizen, but you give up a little bit of your ability to express yourself when you enter into an employment contract with an employer. Your job is to further the goals and the objectives of the company. And if what you're doing or what you're saying is counter to that furtherance, then that's a problem. You know, that's a problem. If I walked into my job and, you know, started contradicting everything my employer was saying, you know, the clients would look at me and look at him like, you know, who do I believe? You know, I mean, it would just lead to chaos and unhappy clients, and revenue would fall because, you know, people wouldn't be coming back because they'd be confused and upset that maybe their pet's not getting the best care. Because who do I believe? So yeah, I think that definitely employers can sanction and discipline employees that are contributing to loss of revenue.
Now, what about off the clock?
See, off the clock, that to me is more of a gray area. I think that theoretically it shouldn't matter because you're off the clock, you're on your own personal time. But at the same time, in today's landscape, you're finding that it does matter, like with Roseanne. You know, and certainly in other situations, it's happened where what you've done off the clock has come back to hurt you in your current employment position.
Yeah, well, there's a story that, let me get the exact date here. It goes back to 2013, and this is a Boca Raton, Florida school teacher named Olivia Sprower was fired because the district learned that she was doing bikini modeling. 26 years old, and they fired her from the Florida high school, from her job as an educator. Should the school be able to do that?
See, that one's tricky because...
How is it tricky? This is the problem. It shouldn't be.
No, you're absolutely right. It shouldn't be.
Either you, when you're off the clock, you have the right, as long as you're not hurting someone. I mean, you know, obviously if she went home and murdered somebody, I could definitely, or did something violent.
That's more clear cut, obviously.
Then obviously she may be a danger to herself and others. You don't want her around your children.
Yeah, you don't want her around your children. But I think it's trickier because, for that very reason, because she is around children. And I think that people tend to get very touchy, except in England where, you know, people in pedophilia rings have more rights than people who are reporting on them. But in America, at least, people tend to get a little touchy about what is and is not appropriate to have around children, especially in the age of the internet when stories from 5 years ago are easily accessible. I think that's what makes it trickier. I 100% agree with you. I think that it shouldn't be a gray area. It shouldn't be a tricky situation. It should be very clear cut. But I think that in this situation, the reason it's trickier is because people tend to get very touchy about what goes on around their children. And a lot of people do not want someone who is comfortable taking off their clothes, not all of their clothes, mind you, but, you know, in this case, you know, most of their clothes, bikini modeling, you know, who's comfortable taking off most of their clothes around their children. But
do these same people take their kids to the beach?
Yes,
all right,
they do.
So what are they seeing? What are they seeing? What are they seeing? You take your kids to the beach at 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 years old. You're gonna see girls in bikinis.
You are, but I think the difference here is that the girls they're seeing in bikinis at the beach are not the same ones that are teaching them in the classroom, and I think that is why it is more of a problem for people. That's all I'm saying.
No, I think you're right, 100%. I'm asking why.
Because when it comes to nudity in children, especially those who are entrusted with teaching them, especially in light of recent years, at least I'd say the last 10 years, there's been, now I don't have the statistics to back it up, but in terms of public consciousness, in terms of how often it's being reported on, there appears to be an uptick in teachers preying on their students, okay, sexually.
And actually, female teachers.
Yeah, and that's what I'm saying. I was just getting to that.
I was born in the wrong generation.
Clearly. But, it used to be that, the biggest public, in the public consciousness, the biggest threat was, the male teacher preying on the vulnerable, female student. Today, the roles seem to be reversed in the public mind based on the stories that have come out of female teachers preying on male students.
I actually don't think it was... I don't actually think that it's... I think statistically it's an uptick. I think that just before a certain point in time, it was a difference between boys and girls. That female students were looked at as preyed upon, where I think male students, especially in the later teen years, I'm not talking about 12, 13 years old here, I'm talking about 16, 17, 18. I think that male students who did things like that were kind of patted on the back.
Yeah, I'm not saying, cultural, norms or expectations of behavior notwithstanding. I think that the problem here is that, yes, these people are taking their children to the beach, but, their sons are not going to school, and being taught by the women that they're seeing half naked on the beach. I think that that's the issue. For these people who, have a problem with this woman doing bikini modeling on the side, in addition to teaching, because that image, of the female teacher preying on her male students, has been kind of held up there in the last 10 years, as what's going on, in schools today. So I think that that's why this is a grayer area. This is more of a tricky situation. But I 100% agree with you. I think that it shouldn't be. I think that, whatever you do on your personal time is just that, your personal time, and you shouldn't be held accountable for that. But in this particular situation, I think it's difficult to adhere to that because, of what parents perceive as, this epidemic of teachers preying on their kids when they send them to school. They expect them to be safe at school, and not having sexual relationships, with their teachers.
Okay. I'll buy that for $1, but the whole point...
What about $2?
Maybe $2. But the whole point is that this is getting into some very, very dangerous territory.
Agreed.
Now, we went through this as a nation once before. In the 1950s. It was called Blacklist. It was called McCarthyism. Back then, all you had to do was, if at some point in time, we see it a little bit today with the whole Russia thing too, but all you had to do back at that point in time, during the Cold War, and Senator Joe McCarthy, was you just had to have known about somebody who at some point in time was a communist. And your name would show up on a list and you would never work again. Ironically, most of those, a lot of people impacted in that were in Hollywood with that blacklist.
Well, Hollywood's kind of going through that again today, where, just the mere whiff or hint or suggestion of some type of perceived impropriety, can get you taken out of, however many societies and, awards yanked and,
most recent example, Morgan
jobs
Freeman.
Pulled, and you don't even have to present any actual proof. In the case of Harvey Weinstein, I would hope that there's some sort of proof.
There is. He was just indicted yesterday.
Well, that's what I'm getting at.
In front of a grand jury.
I would hope that there is some type of proof because, countless police departments are working cases that involve him. And he was indicted. So yes, I would hope that there's some type of proof. These days, you can never be too sure, but let's hope. But even the mere suggestion of it is enough to derail your career, is my point.
Well, what's really funny is I was up late last night. I was actually watching a couple documentaries.
You were up late?
Oh yeah, big
Shocking.
surprise. About the making of the movie Jaws. And in one of the documentaries, actor Richard Dreyfuss, who played Matt Hooper during the thing. I mean, this was made in the early 70s. Admitted, oh yeah, we were members of a movie crew. We were on Martha's Vineyard, and there were all these, during the summer, there were all these, girls around that would come, and of course we were part of a movie crew, so we were, we were somebodies, and as he put it, there was a lot of sex, and I participated as much as possible. Oh my goodness. Can you imagine the field day Me Too could have with this? 30, 40 years later.
And that's the thing too, is that, not just with this Me Too movement, but also when it comes to, the outcry against historical figures and removing their monuments and their statues, you can't necessarily judge a previous time period through today's
lens,
prism of standards. It's just not going to work. It was a different time. It was different expectations, different standards. So I don't agree with this whole, rewriting history, sanitizing history in retrospect. Geez, that could be a class at this point on a university, and it could be titled that, Sanitizing History in Retrospect. Because that's what people today tend to want to do.
Well, what I'm just waiting for is there's so many people, so many of the Hollywood folks, the Hollywood elites, that are getting dragged into this, and some rightfully, probably, some who knows. But they're getting swept up in this all-purpose catch net. Now, the reason with the Morgan Freeman thing, and he may very well have made people feel uncomfortable. He issued an apology saying, certainly, I deny any, bad intent. If I made anybody feel uncomfortable, that's not what I'm about. And But you look at some of the examples that they use, and a couple things that allegedly were on camera, and you see the video footage, and there is a certain amount. I can say this as a journalist. You sit down to interview with somebody, and probably right before the interview starts, you might have a conversation with them as two human beings. There have been females that I've interviewed, especially, when it comes to like folks like Marina Sirtis with Star Trek. When I interviewed her, she was absolutely beautiful. Because I told her she was beautiful, did I somehow cross a line?
Well, the liberals would say, well, that depends. If you made her feel uncomfortable in any way, then clearly you did.
I was actually running a camera, and I actually had 103-degree fever the whole day. But I wasn't going to miss that interview to save my life.
But I think that the problem with that is that it's impossible to predict what's going to make one person feel uncomfortable and what isn't. The same statement, if you said it to 10 different people, could make all of them feel uncomfortable, none of them feel uncomfortable, or somewhere in between. There's no way to know what is going to make someone feel uncomfortable and what isn't. That's the problem with this whole ridiculous nonsense, is that you can't tell. And if you happen to make an off-color joke, or you happen to, say something that makes someone feel uncomfortable, if it does make you feel uncomfortable and you're on the receiving end, you have to address it right there and then. You have to say, I'm sorry, but, I don't really feel comfortable with you saying that. You can't really sit there and wait 40 years later to sit there and say, oh, so-and-so made me feel uncomfortable. That's ridiculous. If it really made you feel that uncomfortable, you probably should have addressed it at the time.
The point with all this is, and we can tie this back to the Roseanne, to the NFL.
Grow a thicker skin.
we are going to over a very dangerous precipice. You know, for years you've heard about the slippery slope argument. We're sliding pretty fast right now.
You're witnessing it.
And you're witnessing it. There's actually thought police out there. And believe me, you know, if you walk up to someone and you say something, and they interpret it maybe the wrong way, you're fried.
Mm-hmm.
It's not innocent until proven guilty. It's just on the face of it, you're fried.
That's guilty until proven innocent.
Right.
Is what it is, and it never should have been reversed. But, I mean, back to what you were saying about, you know, slippery slopes and where they tend to lead you. You know, if you look on social media, if you go on Twitter, if you're following anything to do with the Tommy Robinson situation over in the UK, there are accounts on Twitter that next to the user's handle, there are little locks, black locks next to their handles, and you cannot retweet anything from that user. And it's because those users spoke out too much or too strongly or too something against the establishment, you know, and were speaking out against the injustice being suffered by Tommy Robinson. You know, so if you think it can never happen, you know, it can't happen here, the UK, you know, to my mind, is only, you know, 10, 15 years ahead of us in terms of where we're headed. You know, they're at where we're headed, basically.
And it's a very dangerous place.
Oh, absolutely. You know, to sit there and muzzle someone like that, you know, where nobody can pick up their thoughts. It's kind of like a relay race. You know, I was telling somebody over there who had their account muzzled, you know, don't worry about it because we'll pick up the flag on this side of the pond, you know, and we'll keep spreading the message over here.
For now.
And as obviously as we can. But for now, we're not being impacted by the muzzling of the people in the UK over this situation. You know, I said, but don't worry, we will pick up the flag, we will keep running the race because people need to know about this sort of thing, whether or not it offends someone or not.
Well, I guess the question that I have, with all this that we've said, where is the responsibility? What is too far? You know, where should somebody step in with something that is said, something that is done, something that is tweeted on social media, especially? Because I mean, this social media giving everybody a printing press in their, you know, is a wonderful thing. It's a huge evolutionary step forward for humans, but it also is opening cans of worms almost on a daily basis. I mean, you talk about laws that may be ancient, okay, that may have to be revisited and nuanced. You know, I mean, social media, where now you can tweet something to the whole world, and you know, it wasn't so bad. You know, with some things, if you said something and maybe only 10 or 100, maybe 200 people heard it if you were not someone of note. It was only certain people who had access to certain platforms that had to worry about this. But now we all have access to that platform. We all can have our thoughts in front of the whole world, literally, in a heartbeat. And sometimes people don't think through what they say in a heartbeat.
The crime here is really just not thinking something through. And I think that happens to everyone, you know. And there was a really good point made by several users on Twitter, the names of which escape me, but several Twitter users were pointing out, you know, referencing the Bible passage where Jesus saves the adulterous woman. The crowd's ready to stone her because the punishment for adultery, she was caught in the act of adultery, and the punishment for adultery was being stoned to death. You know, and Jesus, stood in front of her and said, let he who is without sin cast the first stone. And I think that this is kind of a similar situation where, let he who, has never run into this situation cast the first stone. Everyone has had a situation, has had an instance where, they haven't quite thought the entire thing through, and yet they've said it.
Or they've done something in their past that they look back and now say, boy, that was silly. Maybe I was younger or whatever. I shouldn't have said that. I shouldn't have done that.
Absolutely. You have people, everybody has skeletons is the point.
Well, how far back do we have to go digging for skeletons now to say whether someone is a good person or a bad person?
And that, again, that's the slippery slope. You're seeing it played out today in the fierce debate that's raging all across the country about, well, were the founders good people? Were they bad people? Were these Revolutionary War heroes and Civil War heroes, were they good people or bad people? You cannot judge the entirety of a person's character by the one thing that they didn't think through, or the one, negative thing that they ever did. Because if that were the case, everyone is a bad person, including the people who are sitting there tearing down the people, that are supposedly terrible people.
You mean like Matt Lauer, Charlie Rose?
Yeah. I mean like them.
Tom Brokaw.
Everybody has done or said something that has been wrong or has offended someone. And I think the sooner we all recognize that and get on with our lives, the better off everyone will be. If somebody has said something, that has genuinely, and I'm not talking about, the faux outrage that permeates every corner of society today. I'm talking about genuinely has offended someone. If something someone has said has genuinely offended someone and they've apologized, move on. Get on with your life. Don't be the perpetual victim, that society seems to advocate as, some type of protected class. But don't be the perpetual victim. Get on with your life, Somebody should not be punished, for, as harshly as they have been, such as Roseanne, for not thinking something entirely through, and then especially in light of the fact that she apologized. So I don't understand these people that think that we should always live in a perpetual state of outrage, and that it's okay to judge somebody for the littlest thing in their past that they've done that may or may not have been the best version of themselves.
As long as I'm doing the judging.
Yeah, and as long as I'm doing the judging, and apparently there's no skeletons in my closet. Everybody has a past. Everybody has skeletons. The point is not to continually dwell on them. It's to sum up, whether the majority of what they've done is good, or not so good. It's not to judge, make a summary judgment based on the tiniest slip up. Because everybody does that. We're human beings. We're not, not yet anyway. We're not hybrids, of man and machine. We're not AI. We do have screw-ups. We learn from mistakes. I think that's, what everybody seems to forget is that human beings learn by making mistakes, But I think that in this case, she shouldn't have had to learn by losing her livelihood. She made a mistake. She apologized for it, but that still wasn't good enough. And that shouldn't be the case.
And like we said at the outset, this wasn't just her. It's the co-stars. It's the crew.
Yeah, there's a lot
hundreds
of
of people. I mean, a couple hundred people probably lost their jobs with the Roseanne show going down. For what? I mean, the other part too is, if somebody says something, for instance, I brought up The View before. I can't stand The View. I hate The View.
Yeah, The View pretty much sucks. I don't really see any redeeming value to The View.
They are ridiculous. They are ridiculous, illogical, idiotic human beings.
They're like caricatures of human beings. They're not real human beings. They're just caricatures of what you think a human being would be like.
You know? But, so what happens every day when that show comes on? I'm not watching it. I try to avoid clips from it whenever possible. Only if I need to see a clip because of a news story I'm doing or something like that will I even bother to view a clip. Because they are just so hateful and despicable people. I don't want to hear them run their mouths. I turn them off.
But that's the difference, is that you turn them off. I mean, it's a very logical chain of events here. The progression is very simple. It comes on, you don't like it, you turn it off. It's very simple. That's all you have to do. You know, they're allowed to run their mouths, clearly, because their employer seems to endorse it, which apparently is the same as the one that silenced Roseanne. So that's interesting. But their employer seems to endorse it. They're allowed to say it at work, apparently. So, but if you don't like it as the viewer, you just shut it off. Same thing should happen with Roseanne. You know, if you don't like the views that she has or that she's voicing, and you don't want to hear them, just shut it off. Walk away. Don't, consume her content. It's very simple.
And it's not like most of the people who despised Roseanne's point of view are watching her anyway.
Exactly. I mean, the I think it was 32 million people were the ratings for that. If the 32 million people that were watching her were probably all Trump supporters anyway. So clearly, the deplorables, it's the channel for the deplorables, of which I count myself a member, so it's all right. Because it's okay if you're, calling yourself a name, as long as you're a member of that group. At least in America for now. So, they weren't watching anyway because that wasn't the type of content that they cared about. So what difference does it make? To quote Hillary Rodham Clinton.
Yeah, but I guess what it is, and there's this term flying around out there called virtue signaling.
Oh, God. Just another highfalutin term for nonsense.
But this is a prime example of it.
But how can you virtue signal when you yourself have skeletons in the closet?
Well, I'm talking about ABC as an entity.
I know,
not an individual. I'm just saying, but the company. Oh well, we don't want to stand with someone who thinks that way.
But you do, ABC.
Even though, yeah, you do. That's the hypocrisy. Yeah, you do. And Roseanne did apologize. But we're not going to stand for it, so we're going to show just how righteous we are. And we're going to cancel the show. Well, great, ABC. Wonderful. Hats off to you. Now do the right thing tomorrow and shut The View down.
Mm-hmm.
If hate speech, racism, bigotry are your thing, get rid of Joy, Whoopi, and gang. Because they are the worst on television. They make Roseanne's tweet look like a ride at Disneyland.
They used to play shows like that at, like car dealerships and stuff. Places where you were, like, waiting to have, work done. I've noticed they don't play them anymore. When I've taken my car in to get serviced, they're not playing that sort of nonsense anymore because they know that people just don't want to watch that kind of crap.
Do they have CNN on?
No, actually. They generally tend to have, center-right programming on.
Well, the reason I asked, because CNN they pay like airports and places and terminals and things like that to show CNN. They actually pay the places to show it.
Wow, that's pathetic. But, you gotta pay people to watch you. That's like paying for likes and, retweets. That's pretty pathetic. If you can't get there on your own, it's kind of a problem. But, Yeah, no, I just, they don't put things like that on anymore in dealerships, you know, or in places where you would be waiting to have work done on something, because they know people don't want to watch that crap. They know that it's divisive, and nobody wants, they don't want angry people, you know, waiting and having fistfights in their lobbies over, you know, nonsense. So yeah, it's just crap, and I agree. I mean, there's no redeeming value to it. You know, it's not like, I mean, people like to sit there and say, oh, well, you know, The View is, you know, they're having conversations about, you know, the issues in America. And not really. I mean, the conversation you and I are having is much more of the tone that The View should be taking. Even if you and I were of separate, you know, different political leanings, and we were disagreeing, I guarantee you it would still be more respectful than the BS that comes off of The View.
Yeah, well, we don't agree all the time on everything.
Absolutely not. I mean, we're not carbon copies. We're not clones. I mean, we are the two biological genders, so, you know, we couldn't possibly be the same gender.
God, I hope not.
But, you know, so... Yeah,
that would make the wedding really interesting.
It really would. But, you know, we don't always agree. But even if we disagree, and it does get heated at times, which, you know, it does. Everybody clings to their own, you know, personal ideologies. But it's still, even at its worst, more appropriate and more respectful in disagreeing than the crap that comes off of The View.
I agree with that. And... okay, people, we're almost out of time. We want to remind you, if you like what we say, if you don't like what we say, if you want to cancel us, you know, send us an email, contact us. If you do like what we do, there's a PayPal me link to Charcoal Media. Send us a tip. $1, $2, $5, $10, whatever you got. Will keep us going. And we also have the Snark is Real, hashtag the Snark is Real t-shirt, which is available on our blog website where you're seeing this. Just go right below and click on the link and get yourself your own hashtag Snark is Real, the Snark is Real t-shirt.
All right, and that's all the time we have for today. So thank you, America, and good night.
This is Charles W. Kim and Nicole M. Wells. We'll see you next week.